Welcome. As usual, these sessions are being recorded, and this is the third session of our second season of the Evaluation for Learning workshops. As you know, we've been working our way around the Evaluation for Learning cycle. Started at the beginning of season 1 with what is our purpose, and we've moved all the way through to data analysis and trying to determine the implications and meanings of the evaluation data that we have collected. So in today's workshop, we're going to be talking about how do we make meaning from data and how do we determine what the evidence is telling us about whether we're doing the right things or we're doing things right. So that's where we are today. And I think it's really important to point out that this diagram centers equity in the center of the evaluation for learning cycle. So we challenge ourselves and we invite you to challenge yourselves as well to think about how the choices we make around evaluation affect equity and access and whose voices are being elevated at every stage. The outcome and objectives, these are unique to today's session. So we're talking about spending time learning from data and determining how to implement a collaborative meaning-making process in our work. So I'm going to pass it over to Christy, I believe, for the next section.
That's right. Thanks, Libby. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then you are going to talk a little bit about what is meaning making in the context of this series. So there are lots of different ways that meaning making can be defined, which we'll explore a little bit here in a moment. But basically, it's a process of making sense of our data. So as we've talked about throughout both the first season and this season of this workshop series, what can be included as data is really diverse and expansive, right? It's not just numbers in a spreadsheet, though sometimes it is. So it's this process of making sense of our data. For example, by recognizing patterns that suggest relationships worth investigating further, or by evaluating the strength of a conclusion that can be inferred from any data set. And then also we're going to talk about today determining implications for our programs. And I wanted to point out that these two sub-bullets, the recognizing patterns and evaluating the strength of a conclusion, those come directly from Framework for K-12 Science Education, which is sort of the foundational document. There, Libby has one for the Next Generation Science Standards, which in this chain are the foundational document for the Oregon Science Standards. And so we were talking about on our team how inviting students into the evaluation process, in addition to being really helpful for us as folks who are running programs, in addition to maybe helping students shape the directions of programs that they love and care about, also has this other layer of like bringing youth into evaluation processes can actually help them develop some of the skills that we are setting out and that the Oregon Department of Education have set out for students to develop as part of their schooling. So we're not going to talk too much about that, but we did just kind of want to mention it as a little bit of food for thought. And so this isn't really meant to be like an exhaustive list of what meaning making is, but it just kind of gives an idea. And one way to think about meaning making is to think about, okay, what are some stories that we could tell from these data, right? And so there could be lots of different stories that could be told from the same bits of data, which we will be exploring quite a bit more today. And also, there's a ton of diversity in this. At the top here, it says a process of. What that process looks like of meaning making is extremely diverse. It varies by culture, it varies by age, it varies by personal preference. Like there's all of these different things that might influence what that process of meaning making looks like. And so we are actually going to explore that idea a little bit. So we're going to be doing a little bit of silent reading while we're all here together in the room. And then we'll be putting you into breakout groups to talk a little bit about meaning making, maybe insights or thoughts you have from a quote that we're going to read, or bringing sort of how you think meaning making works for you or for your community. So this is just an excerpt. I'll give you a more full piece of it here in a moment, but this is a quote that's actually, we're sort of I guess we have a lot of like nested chains of things happening here since this is the second one I'm already talking about. This quote is in this book chapter called Reframing Evaluation, Defining an Indigenous Evaluation Framework. And they are quoting Vine Deloria, who's Standing Rock Sioux, from some of his work in 1999 about how knowledge is derived, or essentially how meaning is made in his community. So kind of the idea we're exploring here is that there are lots of different ways that people make meaning. And so what you read in this quote might resonate for you in the way that you and your community might make meaning. It might seem very different. And so we're kind of just wanting to explore that idea and give you a little bit of time in the group to process what you've read.